Greetings and welcome, ladies and gents, I'm the Super Gamer, and oh boy, this has been a long time coming because if there's any game that my opinion has turned so interesting about since I first reviewed it, it's Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Ever since I first stated that I thought that Sonic 2 was overrated, I'm sure a lot of you have wondered why I think that. Well, first I want to clarify something. I don't hate Sonic 2 at all. I do think that Sonic 2 is a good platformer for the Sega Genesis, but would I go as far as to say it's the best game ever made? No. There are a lot of things in Sonic 2 that I feel people just brush aside just to blindly praise the game for being Sonic 2. What are those problems exactly? Well, let's finally talk about it. This is Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Genesis. After the events of Sonic 1, Dr. Ivo Robotnik is once again capturing animals in order to retrieve the now 7 Chaos Emeralds in an attempt to conquer the world. Except this time, he is also constructing a giant space fortress called the the Death Egg. Once again, it's up to Sonic and his new friend, Tails the Fox, to retrieve the 7 Chaos Emeralds before Robotnik and put an end to the Mad Doctor's plans. Much like the first game, the story is fairly simple to follow, but it's also a good step up from the first game to be a true sequel. Robotnik's plan is the same as last time, except now he means business. So far, so good. Sonic 2, while admittedly not looking too much different from the first, is still a significantly better looking game than the first. Compared to the first game, Sonic 2 has a lot more detail put into its environment, and the themes and colors really pop out more here this time. Sonic 2 was also one of the first games in the 90s to use 2D sprites to create 3D type models. I mean, we'll get to the special stages soon enough, but it's still technologically impressive for its time. The soundtrack, however, is a major improvement over Sonic 1 in every conceivable way. In fact, I'll even go as far as saying that Sonic 2 has my favorite soundtrack on the Sega Genesis. It's that freaking good. Even some of the worst stages in the entire game have some dang good music to listen to. So if there's anything I'll agree with Sonic 2 enthusiasts on, is that the soundtrack is absolutely the best in the original trilogy. And lastly, the sound design is also on point just as before. Carrying over from the first, Sonic 2 is a platforming game where you travel through different levels, collecting rings to stay alive, busting bots, and searching for the special stages to collect the Chaos Emeralds. When compared to the first game, Sonic 2 is significantly faster in this game than the last one. One of my biggest issues with Sonic 1 is the fact that for a game about going fast, it sure didn't feel fast. Sonic 2, however, is a fast-paced game, and in a lot of ways, it's better for it. This game also introduces a series staple, the Spin Dash. By pressing down and mashing the jump button, Sonic will start to build speed and boost forwards, and this is a great tool to get up steep ramps and hills. Along with that, this game introduces Tails as a sidekick, and he's quite helpful with some bosses, since he has infinite lives and can deal damage at the same time as you do. Overall, this game seems amazing, so why don't I like it as much as the first one? Well, there's a few reasons why. One is, I feel that Sonic 2 is way harder than it needs to be. Like, the second stage literally has water sections that most new players won't be able to navigate quickly before drowning and possibly getting a game over. Like, I find that because of the more open-ended level design of Sonic 2, the game is significantly harder to play through, since I find myself losing rings quite a lot. But if you want to talk about something I absolutely despise in Sonic 2, the frickin' special stages. Dear God, activate rant mode! First off, getting into the special stages is a complete hassle. In Sonic 1, all you had to do to get into the special stage was to simply bring 50 rings to the goal and jump into the floating ring. In Sonic 2, you need to bring 50 rings to a nearby checkpoint, which sounds like it would be better, but because of the more non-linear level design, losing rings is a lot easier to do in this game. I especially love those moments where you're next to a checkpoint, but because of some obstacle you couldn't see, you suddenly lose all of them and can't use that checkpoint. The actual special stages themselves are also complete trash. You travel on a 3D plane collecting rings while avoiding bombs that will make you drop rings. Playing through these special stages is just as bad as trying to play through the ones in Sonic 1, but for different reasons. Sonic 2's special stages are bad because they're 3D. Due to the primitive hardware at work, it makes it nearly impossible to know what's coming up. Oh sure, they don't start out too bad, but when they get bad, they get really bad. It also doesn't help that if you don't have enough rings at the checkpoint, you are kicked out of the stage without your rings and no option to try again. I mean, at least in the first game, it's quite clear that entering certain areas of the stages would kick you out of them. Here, the game is just like, well, you lost, I guess. Complete and utter bull. These special stages, without a doubt, are the worst special stages in the entire classic Sonic series. And frankly, Super Sonic is not very worth it in this game, since that just makes everything too easy. I've always preferred when Super Sonic was part of the main story and not as a gimmick to get the best possible ending. And speaking of the end game, not that one.
Ah, spoiler alert!
Can I just say that Metropolis Zone is complete garbage? I mean, Labyrinth Zone was bad, but at least with practice, I could play through it just fine. Here? Crap me if I knew how to get through this stage without losing lives. Metropolis Zone has some of the most unforgiving level design, goes on for 3 acts instead of 2, and has not only the most obnoxious enemies in the series, but also the most obnoxious enemy placement in the series. Those freaking slicers are the absolute bane of my existence. And these star enemies are especially annoying since you can never kill them yourself. Plus, whenever you go near them, or when Tails goes near them, they will launch spikes in all directions, possibly killing you. And to top it all off, the final boss, the Death Egg Robot, is... You know what? I've been over this so much already, so I'm just going to replay the clip from my 5 worst boss battles video since it perfectly sums up my thoughts. I actually could tell you step by step everything wrong with it. 1. You have no rings throughout the entire fight, so 1 hit and you're dead. 2. Every time you fight it, you must first finish an uninteresting mini-boss beforehand, also with no rings. 3. The only way to damage the boss fight is to jump onto its chest, but the thing is that there are spikes right in front of the chest, making it near impossible to damage it normally. 4. The only way to attack the chest reliably is to wait for the Death Egg Robot to jump down, bend over, and then jump into its chest. 5. The Death Egg Robot takes 12 hits. 12 hits! And finally, if you don't know what to do, the boss fight is impossible. But if you do know what to do, then it's one of the most long and boring boss fights in the game, which isn't fun, isn't challenging, and by the time you finish it, you feel like 10 minutes have just passed. It's honestly the worst part of a pretty decent Sonic game with, for the most part, great bosses. But the Death Egg Robot can disassemble itself and die in a crusher for all I care. TLDR, I don't like it.
So, despite my many issues with Sonic the Hedgehog 2 as a game, I still think that as a game, it's a great one. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's an improvement over Sonic 1. It's just when I said that it was overrated, I was more referring to the fact that there are a lot of issues with the game I had that people just seem to either not know about or just completely gloss over just to praise the game just because it's Sonic 2. But regardless, I'm going to give Sonic the Hedgehog 2 a 4 out of 5. Until then, I'm the Super Gamer, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!